Welcome to the South Bay Midweek Prayer and Bible Study. I know you're going to enjoy today's presentation. The live session is even better because we pray together at the beginning. Feel free to join us Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. You can find the link on our website. Now sit back and enjoy some spiritual refreshment.
The Seventh-day Adventist hymnal and introduction in the form of 3 explorations. And we have already talked about some of the reasons why hymns are particularly useful in getting theology into our heads. We talked the first week about the fact that they are active involvement. They are participatory. Everybody can be involved and should be, and will learn more out of it if they are indeed. That hymns tend to be concise, compact, fairly pithy, sometimes even a little bit dense in the amount of material that they put in such few words. Last week, we mentioned association with past experience. They're playing our tune, honey, kind of experience. I remember what happened when I heard this, or when I sang this first, or whatever. A way of keeping your experience perhaps in mind, up to date. They are designed to be memorable, but with all the hymn meter and the rhymes and all of the rest of that, we expect them to be easier to remember than long passages of prose, perhaps. So tonight we have 2 more to look at. The fact that they are poetry carries itself an extra emotional impact. And the fact that there is music with hymns, in most cases for us, adds an additional layer of emotional impact. So when I have emotional over there at the beginning, I don't mean simply that hymns are an emotional thing to do, but rather that the content, the theology that we are dealing with, gets an extra boost from the poetry and the music. The last item in the list that my textbook gives is that hymns are repeatable without becoming tiresome. I don't know how things work at your church, but I have a strong hunch that if Pastor Chris hauled out a sermon that he had just given 4 or 5 weeks ago and gave it again, some of you would think, well, it was a little strange anyway. Maybe he was under a lot of pressure. If you heard it again 3 weeks later, you'd begin to think maybe you didn't need to hear it very many more times. Okay, enough is enough. And yet hymns, we are usually willing to sing any number of times. There are churches that only know about 60 hymns, and if they sing 5 of them a week with their sing time ahead of time, that's only about 12 weeks until we're back around again. And many times they're back around before 12 weeks is up. We don't seem to mind singing the hymns again. If you are interested in that list, here it is slightly reordered with a mnemonic device that my students use pretty regularly. Camper gets you through concise, association, memorable, participatory, the emotional enhancement that is available, and the fact that they are repeatable without wearing themselves out. So that's our list. We're going to leave that part of it there. And I want to pick up one other piece of tag end stuff that got dropped. First week, somebody inquired about my opinion on the Battle Hymn of the Republic. I'm always leery talking about anybody's particular piece because it's going to be somebody's favorite, the one they really think is worth more than anything else in the book. I have sung the Battle Hymn of the Republic any number of times. I have played it on the piano. I have accompanied it from inside the orchestra. My personal take is I would be just as happy if it weren't in our church hymn book. I think, if I understand it correctly, it was originally intended to be political propaganda, which purpose it served, and served very, very well. But I personally find less reason to sing it thinking of my personal worship of God. Now that's me. You asked for me, that's what you got. I don't want to argue with it. It's just the opinion that I was asked to give. So tonight, I would like to start with hymn number 163. We mentioned this briefly last week. This week, we are going to discover not the things that are in the Adventist hymnal, but some things that are not in the Adventist hymnal. We're going to look particularly at such things as missing stanzas. Actually, that will be a big share of what we do. Punctuation that is out of place or never got there, and punctuation makes a huge difference. I keep working on my students to pay attention to where the commas are in the phrase. Take your breath where the comma is, and if there isn't one at the end of the phrase, see if you can carry the thought on along with your running out of breath. We're going to look at some tunes that were newer or older, some just interesting things that are not actually in the hymn book or are related to it by being different from what the hymn book has. I want to start with number 163. Eric mentioned this last week, hoping that we would be able to sing all the stanzas because I told you we don't have all the stanzas there. So did I get all of them on my slide? I'm just going to run ahead and check. I think I did not get number 5, but number 5 is in your hymn book. So if you have number 163 available, maybe you can finish with us at least. This is the tune that Ralph Hudson wrote, added a gospel song kind of tale onto, which I'm going to leave off tonight because hymns in general don't need refrains. Most of them just don't have. So if you don't mind, let's sing together. Alas, and did my Savior bleed, and did my sovereign die? And it's number 163, and I'll try to keep up everything until we get to the last stanza. We may have to depend on the hymn book, your hymn book for that. Here we go. Alas, and did my Savior bleed, and did my sovereign die? Would he devote that sacred head for such a worm as I? And you notice that's not the wording we have in the hymn book, but that's what Isaac Watts put down there. And there is another change in this second stanza. Was it for crimes that I had done, he suffered on the tree, he groaned upon the tree. That's Isaac Watts, so we'll sing it that way. Second stanza. Was it for crimes that I had done, he groaned upon the tree. Amazing pity, grace unknown, and love beyond degree. Well might the sun in darkness hide, and shut his glories in, when Christ the mighty Maker died for man, the creature's sin. Thus might I hide my blushing face, while his dear cross appears, dissolve my heart in thankfulness, and melt my eyes to tears. And now you know why the last stanza starts with a conjunction, but what? But drops of grief. Where did the drops of grief come from? They came from this fourth stanza we just finished. And melt my heart to tears. So the last stanza says, but drops of grief can ne'er repay the debt of love I owe. Dear Lord, I can't give myself away. 'Tis all that I can do. That's the tune most of us are accustomed to. It's the one that is in the hymn book. And some of the other hymnals that I've looked at give it the Methodists, the Presbyterians, and the Mennonites, sing it to a tune that is also in our hymn book, but it's not the one that we have for this hymn. So I put up for you the tune that is sometimes referred to as Avon, or sometimes it's called Martyrdom. And this is the way those groups sing Alas. Alas, and did my Savior bleed, and did my sovereign die? Did he devote that sacred head for such a war skip now to that fourth stanza, which is the one that gets us into the last stanza. Thus might I hide my blushing face, while his dear cross appears. 'Tis of my heart in thankfulness, and melt my eyes to tears. But drops of grief cannot repay the debt of love I owe. Dear Lord, I give myself away. 'Tis all that I can do. A totally different feel. Any number of times in my class, I will ask the students, does it really matter what we sing the words to? And the answer invariably is yes, it matters. The feel is different. It seems quite different. But you know, both of those are tunes that are in a major key. They start off with nice, pleasant jumps at the beginning. Nothing that, to my way of thinking, says, alas. Alas is a cry of dismay, a cry of disappointment, discouragement, frustration. And I don't think that the tunes necessarily say that. So I've suggested another possible tune. Have it in front of you. Second stanza was it for crimes that I had done, he groaned upon the tree. Amazing pity, grace unknown, and love beyond degree. Thus might I hide my blushing face, while his dear cross appears. 'Tis of my heart in thankfulness, and melt my eyes to tears. But drops of grief and every day the debt of love I owe. Dear Lord, I give myself away. 'Tis all that I can do. Does it matter what we sing it to? It's not the same feeling, is it? Quite different. The other thing I was asked to deal with is number 402 in the hymn book. It always amuses my students to discover that somebody who had a hymn tune in the hymn book that he wrote is still teaching a class, their class. And so I enjoy watching that surprise go by. When I received the packet of texts that the hymnal committee wanted extra or new musical settings for, I was very interested to find By Christ Redeemed on the list. I already knew it, and I knew that my friend and local pastor at that time, Amos Cooper, was very, very fond of it. But he was not particularly pleased, and neither was I, with the tune that the 1941 church hymnal had used with it. We were agreed. And this now is what the tune sounded like in the hymnal. And I do have it here. That's not a bad tune. Actually has a marvelous composer behind it. Sir Arthur Sullivan wrote the tune. I shouldn't complain about anything he did. It is a little static getting started, But that's the way it was to be sung from the old church hymnal, the way I originally heard it, if I heard it at all. It was not commonly done. Would you do the stanza with me just to get a feel for it? By Christ redeemed and Christ restored, we keep the memory adored, and show the death of our dear Lord until he come. His body broken in our stead is here in this memorial bread, and so our feeble love is fed until he come. Which one is this? This is the one that was in the British hymnal. The new Advent hymnal came out in 1952. The old church hymnal that we have was 1941. And as I understand, the new Advent hymnal in England would have come out sooner had it not been for the war, which messed a lot of things up, as you know. So this probably was the tune that Amos Cooper was accustomed to. And again, looking for another possibility. I think I gave one stanza. This is, let me play it through once and then we'll sing it. Can we do it together? And by Christ redeemed and Christ restored, we keep the memory adored, and show the death of our dear Lord until he come. Now that's a slide I wasn't sure I was ready for. Let me check the order. All right, I was afraid things were going to be out of order. That's okay. Save that one. The way it is in the hymn book at the present time, which I thought I had put up, but I might have missed, is 402. Again, for those of you who have a hymn book within reach. Before we sing it, I want to say a word about it, and I had more too in there. The tune that we just did out of the new Advent hymnal had all of the stanzas. Whether the tune was the right one or not, at least it had 6 stanzas, which this tune is supposed to have. And in our hymn book, only 4. That I find somewhat distressing. And in the original, George Rawson wrote, "His body broken in our stead is here in this memorial bread." The editors of the hymnal that we have now, the SDA hymnal, did not see fit to make a change there. And there are those who think this is perhaps too close to an allusion to transubstantiation. Is his body really here in this bread? And so the editors of the British hymnal removed the word here and replaced it with seen. His body broken in our stead is seen in this memorial bread, which I think is a good change. I have recommended it for people who have any concern about it. I think it's worth making that one change. And so I have put it on the screen that way when we get there. I've also noticed that in our hymn book, we have his broken body in our stead. I think it makes a little more grammatical sense to say his body broken in our stead is seen in this memorial bread. So I've made those two changes on the slide that you have in front of you. But this is not the tune that is you're going to have in front of you. The text is there. The tune will be the same one yet that we have in the hymn book. By Christ redeemed, in Christ restored, we keep the memory adored, and show the death of our dear Lord until He come. His body broken in our stead is seen in this memorial bread, and so our feeble love is fed until He come. His fearful drops of agony, His life blood shed for us, we see. The wine shall tell the mystery until He come. One of the hymn writers that is featured actually in our church hymnal is Brian Wren, a gentleman still alive, a congregational pastor, part of a very loosely connected group of British pastors who at the end of the 20th century felt the need for new hymns. Brian Wren has 10 of his in our hymn book. Fred Pratt Green, who was also working at the same time, we put 15 of his in our hymn book. That's a pretty good representation. Timothy Dudley Smith has 10 of his, I believe, or close to that. He also is still alive, pushing the years pretty hard, but still active, still writing one hymn a year, last I checked. Brian Wren has also written quite an extensive book on music in worship. It's called Praying Twice, based on one of the early church fathers who said, he who sings, prays twice. There's that extra emotional impact that the poetry and the music can have on what we do. Brian Wren says in his book, I'm a man who deals with words. I understand words. I preach, I write hymns. I know how words can be made to do the right thing. He said, I wish somebody would set out to explain to me how music works. And I can assure Brian Wren and you also that if anybody could explain very thoroughly how music works, it would be a remarkable thing. Music is something totally different and other. But I would like to give you just a couple of things from this tune that I have worked out that I did on purpose, particularly that moment in the beginning of the second half of the hymn where it goes into a totally unexpected minor chord. You notice at that point in the text, or within two words, there is always something dramatic. Show the death of our dear Lord, so our feeble love is fed. We shouldn't have feeble love, but we do. The wine shall tell the mystery. That comes right square on that word, and particularly in the fourth stanza, the shame, the glory by this right until He come. So I think that extra dark chord at that point is a way, again, of enhancing the context, the meaning of the word that is being sung. As my mind started working on possible settings, I started out with a minor tune, and later on I made it into a choir anthem, and I'm not sure it's anything that is going to contribute to our thinking tonight. I didn't bring it. My second tune was a good deal more upbeat and forward-looking. It was so much upbeat that I didn't think the hymnal committee would find it compatible with the solemnity that we usually associate with the communion service. And so I tried again. And I came up with Anticipation, and that's the one that we have in the book. I've already mentioned that we use Seen, at least when I sing it, and The Body Broken, I think, is a better order for things. To me, the biggest problem with the hymn that as it stands in the hymn book now is not the tune. I'm not ashamed of the tune. I don't think it's marvelous, but it's there. It does the job. To me, the biggest problem with number 402 in our hymnal is what has been left out, what did not get included. The whole progression, which says, the hymn says we're going to deal with from the Last Supper until the second coming, it gets interrupted and unfinished, sadly so. Regardless of whose tune or what tune, the fifth and the sixth stanzas are vital. They are, in my humble opinion, necessary. They have to be there. I have sometimes wished that I'd sent my second tune in and made the hymnal committee decide one way or the other. I really think it captures the joy of being redeemed, being restored. I think it gives more emphasis to Christ's name, and I think that it projects far more effectively all the way to the Lord's return. So if things are at all where they ought to be, which it looks like they are not necessarily, that one doesn't belong there. All right. What I have, and I will provide for you, is the whole 6 stanzas. The first 2 are on this slide that is in front of you now, using the tune that I have come up with that I would rather have sent in. And then I see this next slide is blank. That's supposed to be stanzas 3 and 4. If you have your hymn book, you can find them from there. And then we get those 2 stanzas that really should have been there. So let me play it through once, and then let's see if we can sing the whole package. We try it. By Christ redeemed, in Christ restored, we keep the memory adored, and show the death of our dear Lord until he come. His body broken in our stead is here in this memorial bread, and so our feeble love is fed until he come. His fearful drops of agony, his lifeblood shed for us we see. The wine shall tell the mystery until he come. And thus that dark betrayal night with the last advent reunite. The shame, the glory, God is right until he come. Until the trump of God be heard, until the ancient graves be stirred, and with the great commanding word, the Lord shall come. Oh, blessed hope, with this elate, let not your heart be desolate, but strong in faith, in patience wait until he come. Does it matter what we sing it to? The music is a part of the whole experience and has a message of its own, and that message needs to be compatible with what the words are doing.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We hope you found today's presentation to be a blessing to you. And you know, it's never good to keep things to yourself. It's always best to share them. So find someone that you can share what you have been blessed with others. If you enjoyed today's presentation, let us know by hitting the like button and subscribe to this channel if you want to know when there's new presentations coming out. God bless. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.